horseshoe is back.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, week 1 is right around the corner. The Indianapolis Colts host the Seattle Seahawks for NFL kickoff on Sunday, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we thought no better people to invite on than Bill and Keith, hosts of the Seattle Playbook Podcast. Fellas, how you doing?
It's good to be here. Thanks for having us,
on.
Cody. Awesome. Nice to meet you, Derek. Enjoy finally being able to talk some good, genuine football instead of just pretending like we're trying to make stuff up in the offseason, a whole bunch of topics week after week that nobody really cares about. And now we're finally here. So this is great. Thanks.
It's crazy, man, to think that obviously we're recording here on a Thursday night. It's weird to think that football is a little over an hour away and we are actually like talking about legit football. I cannot believe it. It's about time. That's all I'm saying.
That's right.
So,
Hear ya.
Awesome, fellas. Well, kind of wanted to get your thoughts first off on the Seattle Seahawks going into this year. Last year, you guys had a pretty successful season, 12-4, lost in the wild card round, but still was a very good season, all things considered. The Seahawks were one of the best teams in the NFC. So I'm curious, and I'll start with you first, Keith, and then we'll go to you also, Bill. How do you guys feel about this Seattle team going into this season?
I feel really good about the Seattle team. I think that last year, the 12-4 was a little misleading. The defense was like horrendous at the first half of the year, but the offense won a lot of games. And then down the stretch, the offense fell apart and the defense really picked it up. But they never really played that complete game on both sides of the ball. They got bounced out first round, and it was really kind of disappointing. They retooled in a lot of different ways. Especially the pass rush and other things. They really just added talent in the right spots. I know that cornerback's a little bit of a concern at this moment, but the rest of the roster is really well constructed, and so I feel really good about the year coming in. And I'll let Bill take the other half because I know what he's going to mention there. So I won't take all the different talking points.
Well, I have to say that, Keith nailed what he nailed, but except for the defensive back part, it's a complete hot mess. I think he was a little generous in that. With that said, though, I think there's a lot to like about the team. I think that insiders like us follow the team all the time, really kind of have a good feel for where it's at based on years and years of experience, kind of know the roster in and out, what they're trying to do. National media is not giving the Seahawks any props this year. You take a look at the power rankings and so forth, coming off a 12-win year, first in the division on one of the hardest divisions in football, if not the hardest division. And everyone's kind of got us coming in dead last this year, being in a middle tier or worse position, like Pete Prisco. He comes in at like 18 or 19th in the NFL, which if you do just any homework at all, you realize that's fairly absurd since Russell Wilson himself, I think he's probably got a 9-win floor to him. And then the ceiling with this team is pretty decent. When you take a look at the roster overall, the additions that we did have some subtractions, but the additions I think kind of outweigh that. I think we have a better, well-rounded roster this year than we did last year. In addition to having Dunlap for the entire season. And then we've got Adams for the full season. He missed 4 games last year. We still won 12 games. We kind of limped into the playoffs, exited very quickly in a bad performance. And it'll be really interesting to see how they integrate Shane Waldron, new offensive coordinator, into the scheme and how Russell Wilson meshes with that, along with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett there to kind of take the top off defenses. And we'll see how it works.
All right. Well, we look at these injury reports, and I think you guys can correct me if I'm wrong on this. I thought I saw somebody mention it before I came on here that said that the Seattle Seahawks are the only team in the NFL right now that didn't have a non-participant in practice today as of this moment in time. You had a couple of limited participants over the last few days, but a couple of those guys being Rashad Penny, Dwayne Brown, your left tackle. Saw the load management was an issue there. Overall, when you look at your injury report as is, how do you guys feel? And Bill, we'll start with you on that. How do you feel about your injury report at this moment in time?
Yeah, there's really no concerns on there for the most part. I mean, most of the guys that were concerns went on short-term IR here in the last couple days. So most of the roster's coming in pretty healthy. The guys that are limping along a little bit really don't have any significant injuries. Everyone on that list is expected to play some role, including Dwayne Brown. Nice to have him back in the fold after he kind of probably mostly intentionally missed training camp at his age, and the team was going to take care of him anyway. Load management after he'd spent 3 weeks not participating in anything is kind of a funny thing to read on an injury report, but there it is. And then I think everyone else is pretty decent. I think it compares favorably to kind of where you guys are sitting.
Keith?
Yeah, I'll just echo what Bill was saying. I think that they're in pretty good shape. Like the starters, they are pretty dang healthy. I mean, some of the guys that are banged up, the guys that went on, the went on injured reserve, knowing that they might be available to come off. They were guys that were mostly backups anyways, and we're talking about the third tackle, the swing tackle. In this game, the first game of the year, he's probably not going to play. And so, Rashad Penny's a guy that's limited, who's, the second back, maybe the third back, depending on, if they do a lot of throwing, they were probably going to throw DJ Dallas in there. And so, how big of an impact is he going to have? And so they're really just in a position where the guys that they need to be healthy are healthy.
I will say this really quickly. The strategy this preseason was to really not play anybody of any significance off of the first, second team. So we had a lot of folks competing for depth positions in preseason. Didn't see a lot of starters. I was fine with that, especially at this stage in the game with Russell Wilson and so forth. They really just don't need those reps right now. And they've clearly seen enough in practice to feel comfortable with that. Although I would have liked to have seen him take a couple series, just kind of ironing out the kinks in that new offense. But that's what this Sunday is for.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And right before I let Cody go, for our injury report, I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the news. Carson Wentz is going to actually play this week. He was a full participant again at practice today. So, I mean, his foot doctor did amazing work. Dude's back in 4 weeks. I mean, that was incredible for the surgery he had to have. Paris Campbell's full practice today. Limited participants, Quentin Nelson, obviously our left guard. We fully expect him to be ready to go. Eric Fisher is going to be one of the two big ones, are supposed to be left tackle when he finally gets healthy. There's the question mark on whether or not he's going to actually play Sunday or not. It basically comes down to how much he practices tomorrow. That's going to be the big one. And Xavier Rhodes, our starting corner, our number one corner, did not practice for the second straight day with a calf injury. He's listed day to day. He wasn't at practice at all yesterday, but he was at practice today, just wasn't practicing. So not sure what his status is as of right now, but so far it's not looking good. Cody, you want to go ahead and take over now?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So I'm curious, guys. The Colts come in to this game from a pretty good year offensively last year. I mean, the Colts were pretty balanced in terms of passing versus running. They came in last year with the 10th ranked offense with Phillip Rivers at the helm. They were 11th in passing, 9th in rushing. So they were pretty balanced from that standpoint. But obviously we know now that the Colts have a new quarterback, right? We mentioned Carson Wentz, who will play. And, it's completely a different type of quarterback than the Colts had last year with Phillip Rivers, a lot more mobile, but there's also things that Rivers did really well that Wentz isn't as good at. So I'm curious for you guys, as far as what you saw from Carson Wentz last year, what you've seen with him in Philadelphia, now moving from Philadelphia back to Frank Reich, where he had one of his best years. What is your guys' kind of perspective on Carson Wentz right now going into this week one matchup?
Honestly, I don't know. I thought he was one of those guys that was, kind of a rising star and kind of, I mean, Philly was not a talent-laden team at times when he was there, but injury-prone, missed a lot of time and pretty much every year, did play really well that 1 year under Frank Reich. But then last year, it wasn't there wasn't like, oh, well, he was, didn't have help, or he was getting pummeled behind an offensive line. He just missed guys. Like, he had guys that were open and short in the flat, intermediate range, and he just missed them. He just like throw it into the ground or throw it way away from him. And that kind of stuff really kind of scares me if I was a fan, because that's like mechanical and sometimes you just can't fix it. At the same time, he wasn't that guy 2 years or 3 years ago. So, maybe it's just a matter of getting him back into a system where he's comfortable and he'll be better. I will say that him missing 4 weeks of, camp and practice time with a new team and it's the same offense because it's Frank Reich, but it's still a new set of players around him, new set of weapons, and just not being able to get that rhythm and familiarity with those players. I don't know if it's best for that he is, starting this week, coming back, and he'll have 2 practices.
Yeah, that's a good point that you make. We all know how important those practices were for Carson Wentz. We know how bad he was last year. But you guys mentioned at the beginning of the show, like, your pass defense especially was not very good last year. And you lose a guy like Shaquille Griffin to free agency. You guys, I think, were 31st last year in terms of yardage allowed. So I guess my question for you guys is, how do you guys defend against that? Because, Carson Wentz obviously wasn't great last year, but now he's got a great support system. He's got a former coordinator that he knows really well. I'll ask you this one first, Bill. What do you guys think about how you're going to defend Carson Wentz this game?
Well, I can tell you what's Keith had said, and I'll build on that. Carson Wentz is most comfortable when he's got protection. Last year he was the most sacked quarterback in the NFL under that really poor offensive line there. They had a lot of injuries and so forth. You mentioned deer in the headlights kind of syndrome with him last year, Keith, and I think that's totally true. And I think that was kind of reflective of that whole situation that was going on. There was a lot happening there on the mental side of the game for him, being in that system and being in Philadelphia, which is pretty dysfunctional, I think, from every outside perspective. And as far as the Seahawks go, Carson hasn't had a lot of success. He's been okay, but he's 0-5 against the Seahawks. And it seems like they've been able to kind of figure him out a little bit. I think under pressure, Carson Wentz is a guy that struggles a little bit. And I would imagine that Seattle probably has a pressure plan for him coming into this game to help mitigate some of that back end struggle that I think Seattle's going to have, at least initially, out of the gates this year. So we'll see. I think defensively, you're going to want to stack those boxes because of Indianapolis run game with Taylor back there, which is significant. Fortunately for Seattle, I think we were 5th or 6th defending the run last year. I would anticipate that's probably going to be about the same. And so then you're going to want to have some pressure on Carson Wentz. And I think that we've got the tools to be able to do that this year. We've got a lot of team speed. Darrell Taylor's coming back into the fold. Alton Robinson in his second year. We added Kerry Hyder from the 49ers, 9.5 sacks last year. The interior defensive tackle group is pretty solid with some 3 techs rotating in to help with that. And then the linebacker group this year is probably going to be one of the best, even with KJ Wright moving on. You've still got Bobby Wagner. Jordan Brooks is one of the fastest sideline to sideline linebackers in the NFL in his second year. And Darrell Taylor's coming in to start at the Sam. And then the wild card in this game is probably going to be Jamal Adams. He's under the fold now, new contract. He's not going to be a distraction. They're going to use him in a hybrid role. So he's going to be all over the place, utilizing his instincts and helping with the speed. So hopefully, from our perspective, all those things kind of mitigate that back end stuff, because coverage wise, those guys could really step up and surprise. We just don't know yet. Haven't played any games. Don't have any idea how this is going to wash out. But on paper, it's not looking very good for us.
Well, I will say that you mentioned the 31st pass defense last year, and I think that is a little misleading in that at the beginning of the year, both their starting corners were out, and Adams, the starting strong safety. They had 3 backups in the secondary. They also didn't have much of a pass rush. Darrell Taylor was out with that leg injury. They hadn't traded for Dunlap yet. They really just didn't have anyone that was getting after the passer. And then they had all backups in the back end. And they were on pace to for an NFL record set of yards given up
against them. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was bad. It was bad, but it was bad because of a lack of talent. They got a bunch of people healthy. People came back, they got healthy, and they traded for Dunlap, and suddenly the defense became really good. And yeah, they ended up 31st, but I think they were first in the league in sacks over the last 6 weeks.
They started out being 32nd in the league in total defense through 8 weeks. And at the end of the season, they were ranked 15th. So they literally were the number 1 ranked defense overall in the last 8 weeks. We're hoping that defense shows up.
Yeah. And so this year, I mean, you've got, they added a bunch of talent up front, and, one of the key guys that played a lot last year at cornerback, Reed, is still there. They did lose Griffin, but the other guy that played a lot last year was Flowers. He's still there. Those are guys that are going to be the starters, and they played very large, significant roles during the second half of the year when the defense was much better. Would I like them to have a number 1 corner that you can just look at and be like, hey, that's the guy that you can count on? Sure, but I think there's a lot of problems at corner because there's no depth behind those two, and neither of those two are like super high end. But it's not like they have no one out there, which is what they had at the beginning of the year last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you guys kind of touched on it quite a bit there at the end or at the beginning of that, where Jonathan Taylor, going back to last season, the bread and butter of this Colts team is the ability to run the football. I mean, the Colts over the last 3 years have been a top 10 rushing team every single year, and they seem to be only getting better. Jonathan Taylor, last 6 weeks of the season, outside of Derrick Henry, was the best running back in the NFL. Marlon Mack, who is a year removed from 1,000-yard season, he's returned from his Achilles injury that he had suffered week 1 of last year. And Nyheim Hines, our third running back, who led the team in receptions last year and had the 4th most receptions by a running back in all of the NFL last year. So he shows you the versatility. And then on top of it, now, we've seen teams try to stack the box. That's a common rationale thinking of it in that, you just load the box and it's an easier way to stop the run. Well, now you also have the possibility of a Carson Wentz having the chance to potentially roll out and run, use his legs, unlike what you weren't able to do with Phillip Rivers last year. What do you view of the Colts running game and how you guys might actually be able to stop it outside of just loading the box?
Well, I think this is a twofold question, and I'll take the first half and kind of lead Keith into the second half. The Seahawks are kind of built to stop the run, which helps, but you're right. Taylor's an outstanding running back. I wanted to draft him really badly when he came out because I thought he would have been a great fit for the Seahawks. Mack and Hines are great complements to that. And you've got a really solid offensive line, especially if everyone's healthy. You add Carson Wentz into that, and it really is a problem that you need to solve. But I think one of the ways you solve that is by having a really good offense on the other side of the ball that's really kind of fast paced and pressures you to keep up. So that's where kind of Keith comes in.
Yeah, I mean that's if you can get a lead, I think that running game doesn't matter as much. And the Seahawks offense is built to score 30, 35 points a game. And just tell teams, keep up with us. You're going to have to throw it. And so that does really help. My concern in this particular game for the Colts is just the health of their best offensive line, probably the best guard in the NFL. Quentin Nelson, I know he's going to play, but is he going to be the dominant force that he usually is? And then also with Fisher, if he plays, he hasn't practiced. And so the great offensive line, which is this, engine that makes that running game go, I'm not sure it's going to be as good as we're used to seeing. I think that by week 3, that running game is just up and running and clobbering people. But I just don't know. And it's not. I'm not saying that it won't be there. I'm just saying, we'll see it, and we'll kind of have to get a feel for where they're at and what they can do and what they can't do early in this game, and then make adjustments accordingly.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you because we even saw last year to a degree, the Colts kind of struggled to run the ball the first half of the season, really, and then they kind of found their stride later on. And it does depend on the injury. I do think Nelson's injury maybe is a little bit overblown. I mean, it's just like a back thing. Like it's normal for that. It's not really a major issue. I mean, I don't think it's really going to hinder him. He's kind of been dealing with it for the past couple of years, so it's not really like it's a new injury. So I anticipate him being, pretty good. He's been practicing, but yeah. You're right on Fisher. It's very up in the air right now if he's going to play. We'll see. We'll talk about that in a minute. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts also on the Colts receivers and tight ends, right? The guys that are going to be catching the ball from Wentz. Obviously, T.Y. Hilton out for this game. He's going to be out for at least a couple more weeks. We don't know the severity, how long he's going to be out, but he's for sure out week number 1. So Colts are going to have to rely a lot on some young guys, on Michael Pittman, who was really good last year in spurts and really started to come on to the end of the year, especially in that wild card game against Buffalo. You bring back Paris Campbell, who he's talented. The problem is he just hasn't been on the field. And you have a guy like Zach Pascal, Mike Strawn, who really lit it up in the preseason. And then you got some other young guys as well. Throw in the tight ends, Jack Doyle, Mo Alley Cox, and also Kylan Granson, who the Colts drafted this year in the 4th round. My question to you guys is, you talked about the secondary, especially the cornerback depth. That's concerning. How concerned are you guys, and how do you view these Colts wide receivers and tight ends?
Well, I think it would have been a lot more concerning had T.Y. Hilton been available without that neck situation. And, just quite frankly, Michael Pittman and Zach Pascal, those are awesome receivers. But really, in most offenses, those are going to be your number 2 guys. Paris Campbell I really like, but he's a young guy yet to take a huge amount of snaps and catch the ball a ton. So, and then the tight end group, I think it's okay. I think those guys are going to be serviceable, but there's no one there that's really going to be your go-to guy yet. Not like Zach Ernst was for Carson Wentz in Philadelphia. So it remains to be seen. The question, this is a pretty decent matchup for the wide receivers and tight ends against Seattle's secondary. I think, some of those over the middle things will be an interesting matchup, I think, for Seattle, as far as how Jamal Adams comes into play, how Marquise Blair, what will now be their 3rd year safety, who hasn't had a tremendous amount of playing time, but has huge athletic upside. Some of those guys are really good at disrupting some of the things over the middle. So we'll see. And then for me, I think one of the biggest things that we haven't really even touched upon yet would be turnovers. You guys are a tremendous turnover team. I think +10 last year, 2nd in the NFL, something like that. Seattle really likes to take care of the ball. They pride themselves on creating turnovers on their back end. So the key to this game could very well come down to who keeps the ball and who turns it over.
Yeah, absolutely. And, let's go ahead and go to your guys' offense here, because obviously you talked about it with not having a lot of turnovers. You're right. Russell Wilson normally does a pretty good job at that. I mean, Russell Wilson, talk about a great quarterback that he is and what that he's able to do for that offense. I mean, 17th ranked last year in terms of total yardage last year for you guys. But like you said, kind of was a tale of 2 different halves when it came to the offense. 8th in scoring, 12th in rushing, 16th in passing yards, 4th down or 4th in red zone percentage, which is really good. Russell Wilson himself, 4,200 yards last year, 40 touchdowns, and 13 interceptions. I mean, I think you guys did overall pretty well. And then, we kind of talked about it a little bit already, that the Colts had their struggles at the end of last year against the pass. We're actually 20th against it over a span of the season. But also, we were better in touchdowns allowed. We were ranked 12th in the league and 7th last year in interceptions. And we were actually 12th in the league with 40 sacks. We're kind of hoping that with some of the pass rushers we drafted and brought in this offseason, we think that might actually be able to help that number a little bit. Also, we heard just yesterday that DeForest Buckner confirmed that last year he played the entire year with a joint in his hand that was broken. And he said for all season, he couldn't grip really much with his right hand most of the season. And, he said that's a big deal. Not being able to grip with your dominant hand for the majority of the year is kind of an issue when you're a defensive lineman. So we expect to see an even better version of DeForest Buckner. I mean, what kind of Russell Wilson should we expect on Sunday? And how do you guys overall view this Colts pass defense? We'll start with Keith on that.
So I think the pass defense, the Buckner story, I found really interesting because I felt like he was good last year, but not as good as I was expecting him to be. I was expecting him to be truly great. And then you find out, he's had this hand injury that really limited him, but he played through it. And you're like, well, that makes a lot of sense. That would be why his play wasn't quite where we expected it. And if he's healthy now, the guy's just a force.
He's a beast.
He's going to be really tough to slow down. And so, I look at the pass defense and I go, can they match Seattle's speed? And I don't know. Because you look at, guys like DK Metcalf, who is one of the faster guys in the entire league, and at his size and speed, and he's crazy. And even, the other guys, Eskridge and Lockett both have serious wheels as well. And then you have Wilson, he's not the guy he was in 2012 and 2013 as far as his ability to run, but he's still crafty. He still moves around really well. He can still take off and run and, eat teams up with his legs, but he's really good at throwing on the run. And now you've got a coordinator who's going to put him on the move. They're going to move the pocket around, a lot of play action. So the pass rushers aren't going to know where he's at. They can't just, attack a spot because he may not be there. They may have rolled the pocket. And so that will actually make his life significantly easier. And they've upgraded the offensive line. They went from having one of the worst pass blocking guards in the NFL on there and they replaced him with one of the best. So, in the end, they're kind of set up to really be a good offense. And, I think the Colts have their work cut out for them trying to slow this offense down.
I'll add a couple things really quick. I just watched a couple interviews, one with DeForest Buckner and one with Darius Leonard, and they were fairly quick clips, but both of them were talking about how they're going to defend Russell Wilson, and both of them were like, well, he is who he is. He's great. He likes to move. Our jobs, we need to contain him. And I was thinking to myself, that's pretty much what every single defense tries to do with Russell Wilson. And I'll just be honest, nobody really succeeds at that. For the most part, right? I mean, there's a few times, and most of the time, it digs himself a hole or throws an untimely interception or something.
Game last year, I kind of
stuff like that. Right. So, but the key, I think, here, and we just don't know the answer yet, is how our new offensive coordinator is going to do with Russell Wilson. The whole entire premise, if you watch the Rams, you watch the 49ers, we're going to have basically the same offense with probably the best quarterback that offense has had with Russell Wilson at the helm. And so you take a look at those factors, the entire offense is built to get receivers into open space, to get the ball out quickly, timing, all that kind of stuff, moving the ball in chunks, not trying to get everything over the top, but taking your shots. So everything's going to be kind of set up underneath. There's going to be some wide zone running to spread the defense out. And once it's spread out, that's when Russell Wilson can really take advantage. So that's the way it's designed. The way that's defended remains to be seen. We'll find out how you guys try to defend that, and then whether or not it works. Like I said, it's brand new. We don't know, but I'm pretty confident with Russell Wilson there that Shane Waldron's scheme has probably got the best chance of the three teams I mentioned, the 49ers, the Rams. Now, you've got Stafford there in LA now. That should make a huge difference, and Goff is gone. But nonetheless, I think Wilson in this offense has got upside potential through the roof.
Yeah, I mean, this Waldron came over from the Rams and he brought McVay's offense with him. It'll be a little bit different, but it's kind of the same idea. McVay was able to make that offense work with Jared Goff at quarterback. Now you've got Russell Wilson, a significantly better quarterback in all phases of playing the position in that same offense. I think it's going to be really fun. But Bill's right. We haven't seen it. It didn't even show up in the preseason because Wilson never played, right? The Seahawks kept 30 or more players inactive for all three preseason games. And that was every starter on offense and defense. So we don't really know what it's going to look like, and we won't know until we get out there on Sunday.
Yeah. So you guys last year you finished 12th in rushing yards. Pretty good for you guys, all things considered. I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on your running game, though, because Chris Carson last year, 681 yards, only played in 12 games, had 5 touchdowns. Rashad Penny, we also mentioned as well. You guys have guys like Alex Collins, DJ Dallas, and Russell Wilson can also make plays with his legs. He was the Seahawks' second leading rusher last year. So the Colts come in as a really, really good team against the run. They were second. So they were even better than Seattle against the run last year. That's kind of been what they've been really good at on defense, especially getting DeForest Buckner, now getting Kwity Paye. So I'm curious your guys' thoughts on how Seattle can potentially attack this Indianapolis run defense this game.
Well, a lot of what they're going to do, I believe, is they're going to throw the ball out of those sets. They're going to get where it looks like they're going to run, and then they're going to throw the ball. And so you got the run defenders in there that aren't the pass rushers, and they're going to let Wilson do his thing. And then when the Colts back off because CX are throwing a lot, well, that's when Chris Carson, who's one of the harder backs to get down, as he's such a powerful runner, it starts coming right at the undersized pass rusher.
I hope that's the strategy, but that's not a guarantee.
True.
That's my hope is what happens. But in the past, they have forced that ball, running the ball early in games and often. And if they try to do that, I think against this defense and their stout front, it's going to be one of those deals where we're going to not be able to get into any rhythm. And we're going to end up punting the ball quite a bit. You're going to see flipping the field back and forth. It could be a low-scoring affair.
Yep.
I'm hopeful that that's not the case, but it's the first game of the season.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is that the Seahawks did jettison, Brian Schottenheimer, who's one of the worst offensive coordinators I've ever seen in watching the NFL for 30 years. And so punting him and bringing in a guy that is more creative and doesn't just run up the middle every single play. It should make it more interesting. And then you're right. So we don't know that they're not going to run it early, but a lot of that was Schottenheimer and his just nonsense. So they're in a better spot as far as coaching.
All right. So last offensive related question here I'll ask you. So we obviously know the names of Russell Wilson and Chris Carson, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. We all know the big names. Everybody knows them. Do you guys happen to have, and we'll start with Bill here, do you think there is a hidden star on this offense that really could shine not only in this game, but this year in general?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think his name's Gerald Everett. I think we picked him up from the Rams, tight end. He's our number one tight end. Will Disley's been hurt 2 years prior to last year, and a knee and then an Achilles. Last year, they kind of eased him back, really didn't use him 100%. We had Greg Olson. Each tight end in our group ended up catching about 25 passes, fairly underutilized for the most part. Gerald Everett came in with, I think, 45, 50 receptions on 60 plus targets, 500 yards, 7 or 8 touchdowns. I would imagine those opportunities exist here and possibly expand, especially with Russell Wilson at quarterback. So I would imagine that he's, nobody's really talking about him yet, but by the time half the year's over, here's a guy that's going to be talked about quite a bit because he's going to be extending drives. They've talked extensively in the offseason about creating higher efficiency on the offense, which translates into third down conversions, more trips into the red zone. We already know that Russell Wilson's excellent at converting those opportunities. So I think he's probably one of the rising stars.
Yeah, I would not going to disagree with you. I think that's a great pick, but I think also the rookie wide receiver Dee Eskridge is a guy that you got to keep an eye on. He reminds me a lot of Golden Tate when he was in Seattle. A guy they like to get the ball with really quickly and just let him use his special skills with the ball in his hands because he's really, really good after the catch. And which the Seahawks under Schottenheimer were always one of the worst teams in terms of yards after the catch. And when you think about the speed of guys like Metcalf and Lockett, it's absurd that they were as bad as they were after the catch as a team. And so now you've got a coordinator that really wants to get those yards and put the receivers in that role. And then you've got a guy with truly special abilities with the ball in his hands. It's a great combination, and I think you're going to see maybe not this week against the Colts because he was out for a chunk of camp with a foot injury, although he's back fully now. But I think as the season goes on, you're going to see more and more Eskridge, and he's going to become a bigger and bigger part of the offense.
What's up, football fans? Do you want an advantage on your sports betting this year? You need to download BetQL, the only app you'll need to make smart bets. Their computer model scans hundreds of thousands of bets every year to give you the best bet recommendation for every game across all major sports. Their model covers everything from spreads, over-unders, to player prop bets. If you don't want to use their model and use your own research, that's fine. They can help you with your researching needs. There's sharp data to know who the pros are backing, the line movement so you can jump on betting opportunities in real time, team summaries highlighting previous success and over-unders and spreads, and team lineup, breaking news, and injury status updates. Plus, you can save all your picks in one place to track your success on leaderboards and rankings. Head to the App Store or Google Play now to download BetQL. You can also head to try.betql.co/juice to get started. Enter the discount code JUICE for a 25% off any of their subscription offerings. Find all this information here in the description and make sure to check out their BetMGM in the description to receive a free year of BetQL. No subscription status is nothing. Also check out their sportsbook offer pages if you live in an eligible state for free offers upon signing up. Don't miss out on the chance to beat your sportsbooks this football season.
Awesome. Well, guys, I wanted to last talk about special teams because, I'm always a person that says special teams matters. It can be honestly the difference between a win and a loss a lot of times. And we know that so well as Colts fans a couple years ago. We saw Adam Vinatieri cost us a couple games. And then this past year, the special teams won us a couple games. So the Colts boast one of probably the best special teams units all the way around, pretty well-rounded unit. I'm curious, what are your guys, and we'll start with Bill here. What are your guys' special teams like?
Pete's one of the three pillars for Pete is, offense, defense, special teams. Obviously, every team tries to do that. I think Pete and those guys really try to build some of their roster just for special teams. Nick Balor's a guy that's been around the NFL quite a while. He's been a linebacker. The Seahawks have used him as a guy up front, as a fullback, blocking for some of those running back plays in short yardage. And he's the special teams captain this year. He's a tremendous guy, but the team speed is really, I think, where they focused on the offseason. I can't remember exactly where they were ranked last year, but it seems like it was fairly middling, 10th or, between 10th and 15th, I think, overall. I would imagine that comes up a little bit. I don't know if it's going to be as good as the Colts special teams unit, which has got a great reputation. but they do have a lot of young players with a lot of team speed, a lot of headhunter guys on the outside and so forth. And, we'll see. I'm really confident in our kicking game, both with our punting, being able to kind of flip the field, as I talked about earlier, get the ball to the other end of the field. And then Jason Myers is a guy that I'm really confident with. And in fact, I think he had the most field goals in a row for the franchise last year.
Well, yeah, and Michael Dixon, the punter, is an All-Pro, right? He's 2 of the 3 years that he's been in the league, and the guy is just a monster. He has this really weird kicking motion. That's it. You're gonna watch it and you're gonna be like, "Was that blocked?" No, that's just how he kicks it. But he hit. Yeah,
he literally he stops as soon as he hits the ball, and his leg stops, and you're like, "What happened?"
Yeah, but he can hit a 70-yard punt in the air whenever he needs to. Yep. And his net last year was just under 50 yards, which is crazy. And then the other thing that he can do is he does weird things. Like he's like, hey, I'm going to have the ball spin a different way off my foot. So that way, when they try and catch it, it's spinning the opposite way and they don't see it coming. And he generates muffed kicks that way. It's just weird stuff that he does with the football that I've never seen a punter do before. So yeah, he's kind of special. I will say they've given up a few big kicks because people get out of their lanes, and they haven't had a great return game. The Seahawks have. They're not. The last couple of years they just haven't been great at getting those kick and punt returns. And that's been why they were middling last year. And I hope that's one of those things that they've picked up. DJ Dallas looked really good in the preseason and at camp returning kicks. So that might be an improvement. I mean, ever since they took Tyler Lockett off the punts, they just haven't had anyone that stepped up and really owned that. And if they can have that, I think they'll be good. But yeah, they're good at coverage and they're good at kicking the ball, but now they just need a return game.
Gotcha. All right, gentlemen, we're going to end this great conversation here with your score predictions. I'm going to get Keith here first, and then we'll go Bill, and then we'll go Cody, and then we'll go myself. So, Keith, go ahead.
So I think this is going to end up being a fairly low-scoring game. I think that the Colts defense is good, and I think Seattle's offense, which is going to be great down the stretch. I think the fact that they haven't even had a preseason snap together, it means that they're going to be a little, rusty and trying to figure it out. And I'm sorry, but I'm just really not sold on Carson Wentz as a starter. I might have been if he hadn't gotten hurt and had all the practice time, but without it, I think it's going to end up being a low-scoring game. I've got Seattle sneaking out a victory on this, like 17-13.
Wow.
Okay.
Bill's going to have a very different answer. I can guarantee you that.
Well, I could have gone that way. I mean, absolutely. You've got some valid points. Certainly, it could be a struggle and a slog based on what we talked about earlier. Teams decides it wants to run and try to dictate terms to the Colts defense. And I'm sorry, that's probably just not going to happen. I think the only way to really beat the Colts is through the air and to try to put pressure on the defense to stop DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and some of the other weapons that they've got. Conversely, on the other side of the ball, if Seattle can build any sort of lead to help put pressure on the Indianapolis Colts offense to kind of take the ball out of Taylor's hands and put it into Wentz's hands, I think plays into Seattle's favor. And I think that ends up raising the score a little bit higher than Keith anticipates. So I'm thinking something in the lines of 27-23, 27-21, something like that. Of course, I need to pick my Seahawks, but it could go either way. I'm really curious to see how Carson Wentz shows up. He hasn't had a lot of opportunity to beat the Seahawks so far, but he's in a new system. It's a new start for him. I truly wish him the best because I think he's a great guy that was in a bad situation.
Awesome. Yeah, I was going to say it comes down to the best player on the Colts offense, in my opinion, and I think Bill will agree, is Taylor. And if the Seahawks can get the ball out of Taylor's hands by getting a lead and forcing the Colts to pass, there's nothing bad that comes from getting the ball out of the best player on the opposing team's hands. And so that has to be something that they are going to be working to do.
All right, Cody, go ahead, man. We're kind of outnumbered here on the Seattle train so far.
Well, you're not going to like it, Derek. I'm just going to say that. You're not gonna like my prediction. I'm sorry, but like I have a couple points for this, and I try not to be homerish at all. Like sometimes it happens, but I mean the Colts haven't won a regular season opener since 2014. First off, now I get it, like superstition or whatever. They very much could pull this one out. But I will say that I'm terrified that Xavier Rhodes hasn't practiced in 2 days, and I'm terrified of Rocky Sin and those guys matching up against the two Seattle receivers that are both 1,000-yard receivers last year. I just think that's going to be their Achilles heel this game. And you mentioned, talking about how the Seahawks might be a little bit rusty, so maybe that'll play in the Colts' favor a little bit. But also the fact that Carson Wentz, he's just now getting back into it. He's been there a couple weeks, but he hasn't played. He didn't play a preseason game, so we didn't really get live bullets with these guys. So for me, it's kind of like I feel like both these offenses might be a little bit rusty, but I think ultimately they might find their stride down the stretch because neither of these pass defenses are anything to write home about. And it's kind of crazy. Like both these defenses have the same strengths and the same weaknesses. It's kind of wild to think about that, but so for that reason, I think I'm going to go 24-21 Seattle. I think it could go either way, though. I really do. I think it's going to be a tight-knit game. I do think it's going to come down to probably one of the last possessions for sure.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tighter than people give them credit for. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's going to be a tight one as well. I'm gonna be the homerish guy in this week. I have to be the one time and one time only. I probably will, but I mean, I think that the Colts have a different outlook on what they're trying to do this year. I think that this defense is a lot healthier now and ready to go. And I think that with the fans being in, I know that really doesn't mess with Seattle at all, but because they're born with the noise, they love it. But I think with helping Indianapolis with the vibe that it brings, and I think with what this Colts team needs, I think that they'll be able, if they're able to dictate the line of scrimmage and if they're able to keep time of possession the way they want to in this game, then they certainly have a good chance of winning it. But it all comes down to that being able to run the football, keep the clock moving, and making sure you're moving down the field the way you want to. So I'll keep it close to 27-24 Colts. I think it's like you guys said, both offenses are going to struggle at times, but both offenses are going to want to dictate the game the way they want to. So, all right, three Seattle votes there to one Colts vote. All right, we have our winner for that one.
People are going to hate me, but it's whatever.
People are going to hate us, but it's okay.
It's the first game of the year.
It's first game of the year.
What are you going to do?
We're used to calling it a loss anyway. So, we make the playoffs a lot of times, even with the loss. So, it's not the end of the world, but if you asked Colts Twitter, they would say the exact opposite.
Well, I know everybody's ready to hand the Titans the division already,
Of
and
course.
I think that people really are undervaluing Indianapolis, and I think Indianapolis is probably more primed to have a second half of the year surge than getting out of the gate. Mm-hmm. But you never know, because you could see an uptick in Taylor in production. Carson Wentz coming over. I know Rivers was a great, outstanding guy too. And you may not see much of a change as far as stats between those two, but I think that Carson Wentz does give you a good opportunity to kind of manage the game a little better overall and be a little bit more balanced. So,
and I think one point that we know, I don't know if any of us have said on this show, is just that Frank Reich is a good coach. And I mean, he's a really good coach. I know his being hired, he was kind of like the fallback option after McDaniels blew Indy off. But I think there's a reason why Doug Peterson's Eagles teams fell apart once Frank Reich left. Right? Who was really responsible for that Super Bowl? I'll tell you, Eagles fans say it was Frank Reich. And I'm not going to disagree with them. I think he's an excellent coach. I think he gets his team ready to play. And has great game plans, delegates to his assistants well. I think he's one of those guys that if you're an opposing owner and you're making decisions about who your head coach is going to be, find a guy like Frank Reich. You will not be disappointed.
Absolutely.
Nice.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much again for joining us. That is Bill and Keith, hosts of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Make sure you all go check them out. Thank you, gentlemen, so much again for doing this with us.
Thank you, Derek. Thanks, Cody.
Good luck on Sunday, guys, but I always say not too much luck.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Good luck.
All right. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. And as always, go Colts. Once again, thank you to our sponsor, BetQL, the only app you will need to beat your sportsbooks. Find their information along with a 25% off discount code in the description of this video. Make sure you go check that out. And also check out their special BetMGM offer in the description in order to receive a free year of BetQL and other sportsbook sign-up offers and bonuses.